Coming up in today's ideaSpace podcast.
But usually I wake up in the middle of the night and then I message people and they're like, why are you up at 3:30? And I'm like, oh, well, I had this crazy idea.
You deserve to be awake to listen to it. That's right.
Exactly. Are you up? And they're like, go to sleep. What's wrong with you? The best investors, the most successful ones, are investing in a team. And the teams that they choose are the ones that they feel that they can build that relationship with. So if you're thinking about a fundraise, you should be doing it now. Not when you only have 3 months left in your runway. Not when you've, think, oh, I'm comfortable. No.
Welcome to the ideaSpace podcast. I'm Ben Hartley, head of ideaSpace. ideaSpace is a community of entrepreneurs, founders and their teams, many of them working alongside each other in one of our 3 offices based in and around Cambridge. Our members share knowledge, experience and expertise to help themselves and others in their high-impact venture creation. In this Startup Stories episode, we talk with Jason Mellad. Jason is a passionate entrepreneur, scientist and CEO and is the co-founder of Start Codon, a life sciences accelerator based in Cambridge which aims to identify, seed fund and drive the success of the most disruptive healthcare startups worldwide. Prior to Start Codon, Jason was the CEO of Cambridge Epigenetics and took it through a $30 million Series C fundraise. Jason is also a mentor, public speaker, and maybe most importantly, the owner of the Lab Bar in Cambridge. Jason has a wealth of experience with startups and is always happy to share valuable lessons with any aspiring entrepreneur or founder. Well, Jason, welcome and thank you so much for being here. I'm just going to start by asking about the entrepreneur. I'm interested in the entrepreneur themselves and just wondering, do you think there are any character traits that entrepreneurs possess? And is there anything in your background or your upbringing that might have led you down that path?
Ooh, starting with a heavy question. Well, Ben, first let me say this. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here and looking forward to this discussion. I think that there are several key traits for entrepreneurs. First and foremost, you have to think big and have dreams and have ideas. You don't necessarily have to have all the ideas yourself, but you might find somebody who's more creative. But you really have this drive to make a change, hopefully for the positive and better in the world around you. You also have to be resilient. You're going to have a lot of failure, a lot of no's. If you're risk averse, if you are afraid of failure, if you think that you're not good enough, don't have that self-confidence to endure, it's not going to go well. So you have to be resilient. I think you also have to be self-aware. And the reason I say that is that I've seen plenty of entrepreneurs out there who forge ahead without really taking in any positive, constructive feedback from their network, from the environment, from the market. And they're just so dogmatic and focused on their idea being absolutely right. That is more about them being in charge than it is about them being self-aware of their own gaps and limitations and also taking on board that feedback and understanding the true unmet need they're addressing. So I think there's this idea of humility and self-awareness, resilience, and creativity, and really just not taking no for an answer.
Absolutely seems to ring true. And did you, your own sort of personal journey, be interesting just to sort of go back a little bit in history before we just look at Start Codon. I read somewhere you won the Marshall Scholarship to study a PhD at the University of Cambridge. Just out of interest, how did that impact you? And was there much of a culture shock moving from the US to the UK?
Oh, culture shock is an understatement. It was a massive culture shock. I mean, I barely left Louisiana. Even though my parents are from the Caribbean, they immigrated to the States. They met in Ohio, oddly enough. Thought it was a bit too cold for them, so moved to Louisiana. And that's where my brother and I were born and raised. And when I was awarded the scholarship, I hadn't even fathomed leaving the country, let alone the opportunity to come here to Cambridge. So I came in very chilly October. It was my first blast of real winter. And the rest is history. I've been here since 2004, but a massive culture shock. I'm from a world in Louisiana where you say hi to strangers on the street. That's not something that's very common in Cambridge, let's say. People looked at me and gave me funny looks. I never experienced proper winter, so I was sleeping in my wool coat because I never heard of a duvet, and someone had explained to me what a duvet was, and I thought, oh, that's fascinating. I need to get one of those. So a lot of things I had to learn. But it's an incredible experience to go somewhere new where you experience, meet new people and are exposed to new ideas.
And out of interest, obviously, because you came as an academic, as a scientist and an academic, what might have triggered you to want to go into the business in essence, or is it just an extension of that academic and scientific journey that led you there?
If I'm really honest, I like to tell people that I'm a mixture of my parents. So my dad was an academic for over 40 years at the same university, a professor of animal genetics at a small, historically Black university in Louisiana. Something he was really passionate was about giving back and being a teacher, but he was a researcher as well. And my mother was a social worker by training, but she was very entrepreneurial. So when we were younger, she stopped her formal job. She was selling cosmetics door to door. She set up a travel agency. She had a pharmacy for diabetic patients, like everything under the sun you can imagine. My mother did it. And she took me along with that journey. So I was always going with her, selling whatever door to door, setting up booths at the mall, helping her set up her pharmacy, you name it. So I had this interesting mixture of going on weekends to my dad's lab and learning how to breed Drosophila, and on other days, hanging out with my mom and helping her sell things door to door because that was her passion. She was very good at selling. So I always knew deep down inside that I like to do a variety of things. And there's this mixture of science and entrepreneurism in me. So quite early on, I realized academia wasn't quite the right fit. I'm too scatterbrained for that. And even my PhD, I worked on 3 completely unrelated topics. It's any wonder I actually graduated in the end. And my advisor said, this life is not for you. And I went, you know what? I think you're right. So I took that advice and just dove headfirst in entrepreneurism.
Yeah. Amazing. And you spent some time at Cambridge Enterprise, which obviously is one of the organisations within the Cambridge ecosystem. What work did you do during that period? And again, I guess that must have been a part of that natural progression for you.
It was, it's really funny because I was doing a postdoc at King's College after I graduated from Cambridge. And during that time, my advisor, who rightly, as I said, you need to explore different avenues, and I'm very supportive for you to do so. And I've have her to thank for so much in my life. I did an internship at a tech transfer office at King's College for 12 weeks, for 1 day a week. And that experience helped me land my job at Cambridge Enterprise when I ended up moving back to Cambridge. Because they said, oh, not only are you applying as a junior associate, but you actually understand what we do. And I said, yes, I did this internship and I learned about spinning out companies, licensing IP, et cetera, everything in between. So that helped me, I feel, get a leg up in the interview process. So everything you do is connected. But it was my dream job. It really was a trial by fire. It was like, right, I'm in an environment where everybody here has a scientific or even liberal arts background. They've typically had PhDs and now they're moving into more of an industry setting. And so it was a nice kind of halfway house between moving out of the lab, but before going fully into industry. I learned so much at CE, and I have so many friends that are lifelong friends that I made when I was there.
And so eventually you joined epigenetics quite early on. I believe you're an early hire in that startup. Can you talk through that period as well? So I guess you had quite a few years there, taking it from its early stages and eventually becoming CEO, and also taking the company through funding rounds. So that's obviously a really key part of your journey as well. Can you touch on some of that period?
Definitely. Again, it's another world of how connections matter. So Ian Thomas, who was my boss, he's the head of the life sciences team at Cambridge Enterprise. I had left to get some real world biotech experience. And he came to me and said, there's a new exciting company called Cambridge Epigenetics that's spinning out. They're only just beginning. You should really consider working for them. I think you'd be perfect. And I thought, oh, okay, maybe I'll talk and maybe I'll see. And I went and spoke to Shankar and Bobby, the co-founders. I spoke to Martin Murphy, who was an initial investor. And I thought, this is amazing. I want to be a part of this. And I just leapt in. I was employee number 3. There were 2 bench scientists and myself. And I basically was responsible for doing everything that wasn't bench work, which, as you can imagine, is a lot. Like, get the products out the door, develop a website, things I'd never done before, but it was really learning as I went along. And I learned by doing. That's something I've learned from myself, is that I can't sit in the classroom and pay attention. I think I've got ADHD undiagnosed. So if I'm going to learn something, I have to get my hands dirty and actually do it. And over the 6 years I was at Cambridge Epigenetics, I just kept forging ahead, was always in touch with the investors and going to board meetings, helped grow the company, grow my team. I kept getting promoted until eventually it was my turn to be CEO. And I had an opportunity to lead the pitches for the Series B and Series C fundraisers. And it was a really great when I moved on to see that the legacy continues, that the company continues to flourish. So it was a pivotal time in my life.
And in terms of obviously being a CEO, even if it's a small company and that you know the people well, it's still quite a lonely existence in a way, because there's a lot that rests on you. Maybe even more so with a smaller company, because you don't have a massive team of support around you. Did you have any mentors, and how important is mentoring or having a mentor in that sort of position?
I think mentors are particularly important for CEOs, but for anybody, frankly. My entire life and career has been supported by amazing mentors and people who've been giving me advice and guidance, and all for free. And all they've told me to do is to pay it forward. So that's why I'm really keen myself on giving back, and coming to podcasts and events like this and meeting with people and just trying to give back, because people who gave and helped me never asked for anything in return except for that. So it's very much a part of my ethos. I was very fortunate to have some amazing chairs of our board that supported me, and the founders and the board members and everybody else. There's loads of support. It was an awkward transition to go from being a colleague to somebody's boss overnight. That, I can tell you, was a very challenging time, because you can imagine if your peer group, and then suddenly one of you gets promoted and the rest of you have to start reporting into that person, and you've come up through the ranks together. That's a lot to handle. But I always tell people, it's a bit like Jafar and Aladdin, for anyone who's seen that Disney movie back in the day. At the end, he says, "Oh, I'm going to be the most powerful genie. I've got all this power and this is great." And then the shackles come on, and then, whoop, he's stuck in the lamp. That's what being a CEO is like. You think suddenly you're in control and you have the power. In reality, you don't. You've just gained 7 bosses instead of 1, because you're bored, and they're all different, and they all have their different motivations. And you have a whole team of people underneath you who you're actually there to support so that they can be their best. That's your main job. It's not about control and power. It's about supporting the team beneath you and making your investors and shareholders happy.
That's it's quite a run, isn't it, from the company of 3 to CEO? You must have learnt some pretty important leadership lessons. What might be for those who are starting out and possibly in that position very early on in a small company? What would be the biggest lesson in leadership that you might have taken from that experience?
If I had to choose just one thing, it's that
Sorry.
Oh, it's fine. Communication. Communication is everything. Right. Not many people do it well. Even if they appreciate communication as important, not everybody has the tools to communicate. And I think too often we focus so much on so-called hard technical skills, like, can you negotiate a license? Can you pipette and develop an experiment? Can you, fill out these forms? Like hard skills like that. But I would call them power skills instead of soft skills. But power skills about emotional intelligence and the ability to communicate that are so important and underemphasized. And it's everything. So many problems come from poor or miscommunication.
Right. Thank you. I think it'd be interesting to know more about the funding rounds, because I think a lot of people here listening in, especially if you're starting out, it's this thing that you see but you can't really touch and feel. It's a very hard thing to wrap the head around, getting into a position where you're preparing for large funding rounds. Can you talk a little bit about that? Maybe even give some hints and tips you might have learned along the way.
Sure. I think the important thing is that it takes a lot longer than you expect. Always. And many people leave it too late. There's a certain idiom that's held in the community that as soon as you've finished your last fundraise, you should be planning the next one. And ideally, even before then. So whenever I close, let's say when we close our Series B, we were thinking about the Series C, and you start building those relationships early. There's a big personal side and business development side to investment. Investors, VCs, like to work with people who they enjoy spending time with. There's a human component. There's a side of objectivity where you say, okay, well, they do this calculation, they have their spreadsheets and their models and their algorithms, and they score you based on their diligence and then market size and everything else. But in reality, if you can have a conversation with an investor, if they feel that they have a rapport with you and they believe in you, they're investing in the team above all. The best investors, the most successful ones, are investing in the team. And the teams that they choose are the ones that they feel that they can build that relationship with. So if you're thinking about a fundraise, you should be doing it now. Not when you only have 3 months left in your runway. Not when you've, think, oh, I'm comfortable. No, always be thinking about it and think ahead. Talk to investors, even if they're not investing in your round now. Let's say you're at a seed stage, but you have a Series A investor who you really want to land for your next round. Engage with them now. Say, here are the milestones I'm going to achieve over the next 18 months. Do they resonate with you? Can I give you regular updates per quarter? Find excuses to keep in touch with them. There's always an excuse to update. On average, we're looking at maybe 9 to 12 months for the companies that we ultimately invest in at Start Codon that we've been engaging and having discussions. It's not like they just applied and we gave them money overnight like on Dragon's Den. In the real world, it takes time. So invest in those relationships and find an excuse to constantly update. Not obnoxiously so, but keep in touch.
I suppose that's where the EQ side of it is so important as well, as opposed to just the IQ. So just moving on, obviously, Start Codon, when you left epigenetics, was it something that you'd been planning long term, Start Codon? Is it something that you had thought that you would naturally go into, being on the other side, or almost in a way? And how did the idea for the business come about?
So it wasn't planned at all. I'll be perfectly honest. I was approached by members of the community who were planning on setting up, it wasn't called Start Codon at the time, we had to come up with that name, but setting up an initiative that would be a world-class accelerator and venture builder here in Cambridge. And they were looking for somebody who would run it and be passionate about it. Now, ironically, I just finished our Series C fundraise at Cambridge Epigenetics. So you could say that, oh my gosh, it's not exactly necessarily the best time to be leaving because, I sold this vision and the plan and we were moving in a certain direction. But I also knew, I had discussed with my board before I became aware of the opportunity to set up an accelerator and raise a fund. I had spoken to my board and said, I've been at Cambridge Epigenetics all these years. I've steered us in the direction where we have a very clear focus, we're developing biomarker signatures, et cetera. But I miss the days when I could be doing a variety of things because that's just my personality. The idea of focusing on one thing only for 7 years to get our product to market was like, well, frankly, my idea of torture. I hate to say it. So it was interesting. And of course, you have to have those frank conversations like, guys, I can do it, but I don't even have the expertise to do this. Now's the time maybe to find the CEO and the leader who does to take it to that next level. And at the same time, I was presented with an opportunity to be backing and supporting and mentoring a variety of companies with a variety of different techs trying to solve a variety of different issues. And I thought, this is my dream job. This is what I've been waiting for. And all this journey of getting to this point, I never imagined, but this is what I really want to do. And it's very clear that even though I invest, I don't think of myself necessarily as a traditional VC. It's because there's this program of support component to what we do. If it were just pure investment for a financial return, I wouldn't be happy. So it ticked all the right boxes. It's helping people at the earliest stage of their journey and providing them as much support as I can to get them across, that valley of death and be successful. It ticks all the right boxes for me. And I just said, this is it. This is what I've been waiting for.
And that's sort of fascinating here, but it kind of makes sense listening to your journey as we've heard. It just seems like the natural progression for you, which is amazing. So again, sort of earlier on in Start Codon's life, we had a question about a team or building a team, and I think it's more about what should a startup do when it's got very little funding on board in terms of onboarding new members. And they've actually asked what's a good equity share possibly and what are the terms that should be associated with it. So someone who hasn't got a great deal of funding behind them but needs to build a team, how would they go about that? So it's a very open and wide question, but just get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. So I would say teams are everything. As I said earlier, venture capitalists are very successful. Investors, full stop, who are successful, they back teams because technologies come and go. You can always in-license a new bit of tech, invent a new tech, markets change, everything changes. But if you have the right team, they will weather that storm and navigate through. Now, if you're an early stage company, you've got limited resources, you're going to have to sell your idea to your teammates because Ultimately, if you can't convince somebody to join you at this crazy, wacky stage now, you're going to have a hell of a time convincing an investor to back you. So think of this as your first and greatest pitch. Talk to people who are your peers, go to networking events, even reach out to people on LinkedIn. You'd be surprised how many are looking for an opportunity, even though they haven't come about it in the traditional fashion. Find people to bring on side. I think importantly, you have a lot to play for. You can offer equity. We do a recruitment of experienced chairs to support our company. So board chairs, we take them from a wide range of the ecosystem. Our companies, because they can't pay them yet, will say, all right, we'll give you some share options now. You help us raise. And then when we get the fundraise in, you'll get paid a salary and maybe even deferred fees from your membership. So there's lots of ways to incentivize people, even if you can't pay them yet, with equity, to get them to help you now. And importantly, you're all in an ecosystem. You have an opportunity to find people who will help you for very little for themselves. I am so enthused by the number of mentors that support our companies at Start Codon, and they don't want anything for their time. They just want to help. These are people who are, Fortune 500 C-suite executives, or people who've had multiple exits and are now, wildly successful both financially and personally. And they just want to help. So don't be afraid to ask for help and guidance.
Thank you. I mean, that's. I guess people listening to that will maybe be less afraid to just reach out, because I think a lot of people, again, starting out, just think that the chasm is too wide for them to connect with people like that. But as you said, I'm sure once people have gained some sort of success financially and in terms of their career, that they probably do want to give back. So people listening, but don't be afraid to reach out.
Exactly. But if I could just add one thing to that, one of the biggest hurdles to just getting started is personal. People self-select and say, who am I to do this? Who am I to ask this person who's famous or successful or whatever for help? Who am I to think that I could start a company and have a go and actually make something of it? Once you get past that hurdle, so many doors open for you, but it tends to be the biggest one that most people stumble on.
Can I also ask about pitching? I know there's a lot of people, we get asked a lot about that stage. Have you got any hints and tips, especially from being on the other side, about pitching for investments? Thank you.
Sure. I would say that first thing is, before you even put together your pitch deck, know that you should have a very well-defined problem and unmet need that you've researched, and that you have a solution that you're proposing. Too often we see people who say, I've got a great tech. It's amazing. It's like a hammer looking for a nail. It's that classic analogy. It's like, oh, I've got this hammer. It's shiny. It's beautiful. I'm just going to bang on things until I find the right nail. It's like, okay, actually, you need to turn it around. I'd much rather invest in a strong team who has a really clear understanding and has done their market research to identify the problems, and then convince me that they have a solution that's going to be effective. I don't really care if that solution has 50 patents behind it, or if it's the first time someone's ever done it. That's actually kind of risky to me. I'm thinking, really, if it's the first time, maybe there's a problem. So I always also tell people too, you don't have to be the first to do something or the only person doing it. Just convince me that you're going to be the best. And then craft a story for your pitch deck around that. Start off with, here's the problem, and be open and honest about other solutions that exist that people have developed. There's got to be competition. You may not think there is, but there's always competition. And then explain that, and then say why you're going to be the best, and how my money and my advice, or whoever you're pitching to, is going to help you be the best. That's your pitch.
Thank you. We've just had a question pop up on the chat, actually, and it's regarding VCs and accelerators. Are there any trends or changes you've noticed in VCs and accelerators over the last 5 years or so that you've been involved with?
Well, I can tell you there are a lot more accelerators than there were 5 years ago, so that's definitely a trend. They're popping up like weeds everywhere. But there's room for all of us, because clearly there's a need. I'd say that from the VC perspective, COVID and Brexit have had a massive impact in very surprising ways. I think because we're one step removed from the rest of Europe, the UK has kind of become even more attractive to external inward investment. So I'm every week getting contacted by US VCs and Asian VCs, and some European as well, who want to invest in UK companies. They perceive that UK companies have a more substance than they do necessarily in the States, for example. I think in the US, people are very good at having a front, but not necessarily the substance. And what I mean is they're good at the marketing and the selling, but there might not be anything to back it up. I think in the UK, we have the opposite problem. People are very good at the substance, but not so good at the pitching and the selling. And now US VCs have cottoned on to that, and they're saying, wait a minute, there's some real gems here. They're just too humble and too, self-deprecating to admit it or say anything. So they want to come over here and back UK companies to grow and expand here. And that's a big change I've seen. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, the story was, if you wanted to get access to US capital, you'd have to incorporate a Delaware company, move to California or Boston, and that's your life done. Now US VCs are saying, actually, we can invest in companies here in the UK. So stay tuned for more VCs from abroad trying to back companies here.
And how would young companies reach out to those US VCs?
Well, there's a variety of different ways. I think they can do so directly if they've done their homework. There's something else about the pitching too. Make sure that you've studied your target. I don't like the spray and pray approach. So what you should do is look at even databases that are available like Crunchbase or, PitchBook is too expensive. So go for Crunchbase, but you didn't hear that from me. Find ways to look at press releases online, which are free. Figure out which investors are investing in your space, particularly if you can find investors who aren't just your local VCs and angels that are investing in your space. And do your homework, understand their portfolio, read up on the backgrounds of the individual venture partners in those VCs and those funds, and then contact them. But the best way to do it is make sure your message isn't generic. Show them that you've done your homework. Say, hi, blank person. I realize that you've got a background very similar to mine, and I've got this company that I really want to pitch to you. I think it'd be the perfect fit for your specific VC fund for these very specific reasons. Not generic reasons, specific ones, so that I know if I receive an email from you, it doesn't feel like you've emailed the same thing to 500 different people. It's kind of like the Netflix conundrum as well. If there's too much going on, you kind of shut your brain off. So if you're approaching 50 or 100 different VCs all in one go, they do talk to each other. And they'll say, oh, you've seen them, I've seen them. Okay, well then maybe somebody else is interested. And it kind of can be off-putting. So I would say go for very specific interactions, do your homework, and reach out on LinkedIn, reach out directly. And if you don't know someone, get a warm introduction. It's always better than a cold call. Every VC will have contact us online, but that's a very small part of their deal flow. It's through warm introductions. So if you need any help, reach out to me. I'm more than happy if I've got time to introduce you to someone in my network if you don't have a connection already.
Thank you. Terrific advice, and I suspect you might get quite a few people reaching out now. I'll just jump on to another question. I mean, you actually touched on COVID, but we had a question about it might be slightly difficult to find, but what would be your view on the upsides of COVID?
Well, there's always a silver lining. And I forget who the quote from, it might even be Churchill about never let a good crisis go to waste, but it's so true. So I think we have different ways of working. I know personally for Start Codon, originally we were going to have a 6-month residential program in Cambridge, but we literally were shut down by COVID 3 weeks after we got up and running. So we welcomed our first cohort of companies, and then everybody had to go remote and work from home. But that meant that companies and founders from across the UK started approaching us because they said, oh, previously I would have had to move to Cambridge and that would not have been feasible for me because I've got, work issues or family issues. But now that you're virtual, we can participate and stay in Bristol and stay wherever. So although many of them were trying to encourage them to move to Cambridge and set up shop here, there are other companies where it may not be the right choice for them and they still want to participate. We even have a company now from Singapore that's coming through the program, and we have others from abroad that are applying as well. So it's interesting how it's changed that ability to access capital, kind of speaking to my point earlier. I'd also say that the way people use space is different. Office and lab space has a different connotation now. And also the areas of investment. So from a healthcare perspective, telemedicine is a really hot topic. Decentralized care is a really hot topic. Anything dealing with transportation and last mile delivery is exciting. And people used to not care about diagnostics or antimicrobials before. They used to be the kind of ugly stepchildren of the investment world. Oh, therapeutics. Yeah, you're going to cure cancer. I get that. But diagnostics, oh, I don't know. And you want to do something for a new antibiotic? I don't know. Now everybody's obsessed with the diagnostics and antimicrobial resistance. So it's a change for the better.
In fact, just in talking about some of the people and the cohorts you might have through, especially with where we are, it might have more of an academic swing. I'd be just interested in another question that's been put forward here. What are the biggest challenges faced by academics when commercializing their ideas, or in fact moving into industry or startups? So coming from an academic world as opposed to a business world.
I think they have to understand what they don't know. I think a lot of academics, first and foremost, with their mindset, they may think, right, I want to have a company. It could either be a daunting task for them, or it could be something that they're really gung-ho about. But if they haven't had industrial experience, they may not be prepared for just how long it takes and how much effort it takes to get a company spun out and up and running. It's not like applying for a grant. It's not like running a project in your lab. There's a lot to it. And it's more than just the technology you're developing. It's also the commercial plan, the team you have to build around it, the license you negotiate from your TTO. This all takes time and it takes effort. So I would say that for academics who are looking to get into the space, do your homework and do your research. There's plenty of advice you can get from your tech transfer offices, plenty of accelerators for every stage of your journey that you can join, just to educate and understand that. And then I suppose once you have that understanding, is knowing the difference between a technology and a product solution. Because academia tends to focus very much on, I got a Nature paper, it's high impact. I've got a technology or a new widget, it's really exciting. But just because it's new doesn't mean that it's going to be commercially viable. It's not about how innovative and new it is. It's about what problem it's solving and how well it would do to get there. So there's a different mindset from academia, because you don't get brownie points in academia for validating a platform, for proving that old solutions work well. It's all about creating and discovering something new. Sometimes new can blind you to what's actually good. And I think it's a mindset change.
Right. And in terms of timeframes as well, I guess you're running on different timeframes in academic study as opposed to business. Do you think that impacts the academic community when they go into startups?
Oh, 100%. Because startups, it's about moving fast and breaking things, right? So you can imagine if you've applied for a grant and it's 3 or 5 years, or you have a project and it only takes a couple of months. Startups are neither of those things. Startups are a beast where you're constantly running and pushing. You're lean, but even though it takes a long time to set up, you've got to move quickly once you hit the ground. So it's a weird combination of those two factors, that it takes longer than you'd expect to actually set it up and get fundraising and spin it out. But once it's actually funded and ready to go, investors are hungry to see progress, and you have to move at breakneck speed and be absolutely laser focused on achieving your key milestones. Anything that's a distraction has to be eliminated. In academia, people, I think, encourage distractions because that's how you discover new things. You're exploring new spaces. In the business world with startups, distractions will kill your business faster than almost anything. Figure out your milestones, deliver on those, and then move on to the next. Don't think, oh, well, I spent the money and I didn't achieve what I said I would, but look, I've come up with these cool experiments over here. Nobody cares. Your company's done.
With Start Codon, did you have a specific, or if you can think back, was there a real fork in the road situation where you had to make key decisions, whether it be on the types of enterprises that you were looking at, or getting funding, or was there a fork in the road that you took one way or the other, do you think?
Yeah, several. I'll mention two. One is building the team in the first place. And, we're still trying to get the right balance. But my co-founder, Dan's fantastic. He's a lawyer by background. He's my chief operational officer. He's very, organized. And I'm very more of a creative mindset and kind of like the big vision. And so together we synergize so well. We've got Michael on my team too, who joined us recently from Sierra UK. He has a discovery background. And so we wanted to bring him in because he's also done investments at Cancer Research UK. Sylvia, who does our program and partnerships, is fantastic. And also who's been helping us out recently, is our kind of in-house talent manager, and we're looking to potentially expand the team too. So the fork in the road at the beginning was kind of a lot of mini forks about figuring out what we wanted to be and who we wanted to bring on board as the team to run Start Codon. The second one was when COVID hit. It was like, oh no, what do we do now? Because we had this whole vision plan, the 6-month program, and they'll be residential with us and it just threw our world for an absolute loop, but for the better, ultimately. So that was amazing. We could have doubled down on the original model, but we've actually evolved and pivoted in new directions because of it.
I just want to, I mentioned at the very beginning that you've got your bar as well. So, I mean, clearly being a CEO or starting up a massive company isn't enough for you. So you decided to start a bar. How did that happen? And when did that happen? And how did it come about?
It was one of those opportunistic things. So a really good friend of mine, Tony Kuzarides, who's a serial entrepreneur and just an amazing human being, one of my best friends, he had always told me that he had a dream to have his own pub someday and call it PubMed. That's an inside joke for people in the biomedical field. If you know PubMed, you can use it to search academic journals. And so a couple of other friends of mine, we were sitting one day and having coffee, and they said, oh, we heard that one of the owners of this bar down the street is trying to sell his steak and move back to Spain. So I immediately called Tony and said, guess what? I got the next best thing. It's not a pub, but it's a bar for sale. Do you want to go in and get it? And he said, of course. So the rest is history. And we decided to name it The Lab. We've got one of the original owners, Peter, who's also great. He's a GP, if you can believe it. So we laugh. We're like 3 doctors trying to get people drunk. You know, who knew? So the GP, the professor, and me with my business hat, we have The Lab. It's a great place to go and network and have fun. And it's actually part of a larger strategy we have, because I'm a firm believer that there's multiple pieces to an ecosystem. It's not just if you're a startup, do you have guidance and do you have capital? You also have to have fun. Where can you go to hang out and meet interesting people and enjoy life? So my ethos is trying to find different things that I can support and different initiatives I can be involved with that make that kind of soup to nut environment, right? You work hard, you play hard. I'm a patron for a theater company, for example, called Bread Film and Theater Co., which was set up recently, I think just before last year. And we used to have events in the lab. And it's all about a new student-led initiative for students from Black and minority ethnic backgrounds to tell their stories and have opportunities in Cambridge. And I said, well, we've got a bar and it's empty on these days. So you want to have your rehearsals in the bar? And they said, sure. And I became a patron and I'm a big supporter of them. So it's just finding opportunities like that to support people and shake things up a bit.
And that's, we may as well have a good plug here. So the lab bar's in Cambridge, and has it opened up post-COVID yet, or is it planning to open or reopen soon?
So we closed during the COVID lockdown because we were refurbishing and doubling in size. So we're planning on reopening in late October. Stay tuned. And we will be twice the size, and we will also have a restaurant. Before we were only serving drinks. Now we are also going to have food.
Right. We all know where to go from October onwards. And clearly, you talked about the bar being a place to sort of meet and share ideas, and these serendipitous moments obviously happen not necessarily when you're sitting in a business meeting, but often when you're in a social environment or talking work loosely. But we find a lot of the members here, or being a part of a community, is of real benefit to anyone in business starting their own business. So how do you feel that sort of collaboration and serendipitous moments how important are they for you or for anyone in business? And maybe even touch about some of your time in ideaSpace as well.
Yeah, it's essential. I think that, for starters, when we set up the lab and envisioned it, it was about creating that space so that the networking and the serendipitous water cooler moments continued throughout the day. So you may even have them at work. I think that we've been isolated for so long now, we're losing out on a lot of that. We're now starting to get back into the office place. And, you can argue, well, it's nice to sometimes work remotely because you get a lot done, but you miss out on that human element of just having a random conversation with someone unintentionally, and new sparks fly. So we're hoping that in this new world that we're living in, all spaces are going to be a mixed model. More hot desking, more people coming into the office, not because they have to, but because they want to, and they feel that that is an essential part of their interaction. Not tying someone 9 to 5 to a desk like bums on seats like we used to, but saying, hey, I'm going to come in a few days a week. I'm going to meet new people. I want to have a space where I can be creative and I can use resources. And we're really embracing that at the lab itself. When I was at ideaSpace and the biomedical campus was very much like that. Like the earliest days of Start Codon, we were there, and it was so good just being surrounded by people who were also starting up. Because yes, we could have done this with just my team of 3 at the time remotely and had meetings at coffee places, but being in the ideaSpace made a huge difference. I remember BitBio was just getting up and running, and they were there, and loads of other companies. BitBio just raised, I forget how many tens of millions, and have built their own office space. So you go from those humble beginnings, and you get to witness and keep in touch with those networks as you grow. And yeah, ideaSpace will always be near and dear to my heart.
That's really good to hear, and I know we get obviously feedback along those lines as well. And I think COVID kind of brought that to the fore. That there's something great about having this technology that we've been able to use, where we can shorten meetings. You don't have to drive or take the bus or train or whatever, and have lots of people's time. We can get be a lot more efficient in meetings. But there's something about, as you called it, the water cooler moment. That you don't get to bounce ideas as much when you're by yourself. You're so yeah, hybrid working's got to be the way forward. I'd be interested to know. Obviously, you're an incredibly busy man. How has all of this journey, both in epigenetics through Start Codon and obviously running the bar as well, or having that in your life, how has that affected your personal life? I know a lot of people in startups here, it does affect them. How has it affected you?
Well, I am fortunate to have a very patient and supportive husband, because if I didn't, 1, I couldn't do anything that I do. And 2, I would have a very poor personal life to go home to. So we have our son, who'll be 2 years old in October, Demi. We call him Demolition Demi because he likes to destroy things. And we are really, I guess, as I said, fortunate to have an amazing group of friends and some family as well, although, we're both, my partner's from Greece and I'm from the States, so we don't have all the family around us that we wish we did, but we have made new family. And so I think you have to have that work-life balance and somebody who can help keep you grounded. So I'm really very, very grateful that Vasilis, my husband, makes sure that I put the laptop down at some point. We always have a joke that if it's not for him, I don't eat, because I just forget to eat because I'm so busy. And he'll say, have you eaten anything today? And I go, I don't think I have. It's 6 o'clock. I should have something to eat. And he's like, yes, you should. Put the laptop down, put the phone away. You're going to have a meal and we're going to watch something on Netflix and you're going to just chill for this. And I go, oh, you're right. Okay. So I credit him with keeping me balanced and helping me keep perspective. It's very important.
I think there's probably quite a few of our audience, or I can see a few just sort of nodding away, this idea of just forgetting to eat. The day goes by, it's the evening. Did I have breakfast? In fact, did I even have lunch? Off you go. I'm also interested, you talked before about success. In fact, those successful mentors you might have had in your life. What does the word success mean to you?
Ooh, it's very personal. So I don't think there, in my mind, is an objective definition or metric for success. I think success and failure is about whatever outcome you're trying to achieve and whether or not you achieved it. So if success for you is financial, it isn't for me. But if it is for somebody, then fair play. You say that I want to achieve X amount of capital that I want to secure for my business, or I want to have a salary of Y, whatever it may be. That could be your success. It could be how much recognition you get in public. It could be how many lives you feel that you've had a positive impact on. So for me personally, my measure of success is the latter. It's about impact. I see Start Codon and everything I do as a way of impacting the world around me and helping right some wrongs that I think need to be addressed. So whether it be in the healthcare space, if it's, equity and equality and diversity and inclusion, this is something I'm very passionate about. These are all things that I think with the tools I have at my disposal, if I can make a positive impact on those issues that I care about, then I'm successful. If I make some money along the way, that's a bonus. That's wonderful, but that's not the main motivator for me. It never has been.
Yeah, I think a lot of people working in startups have some other reason to drive them, because it's often the financial successes are quite far down the line anyway, so you need something else to drive you. It's funny, I was going to ask you what might keep you awake at night. Obviously businesses, you look and you are a very calm, cool and collected person. I was going to ask you what keeps you awake at night, but I'm suspecting you might say your 2-year-old.
I was also going to say I look calm and collected because of the lack of sleep. I'm really dazed and confused is what you're just being polite, Ben. I appreciate that. But what keeps me up at night is actually not worry these days. It's more ideas. So I have idea notebooks that I fill and scribble things down. It's the only way to get them out of my head. And they're not all good ideas. I dare say most of them probably aren't very good ideas, but I'm constantly thinking, oh, what's the next thing I can do? What's the next thing? So I have to discipline myself to focus and make sure I deliver on what I'm doing now, rather than always thinking about, oh, you could do this. Wouldn't this be great? That's amazing. So I found the best way to cope with that aspect of me. I've always been absent-minded. My parents called me the absent-minded professor when I was a kid. I find that scribbling it down somehow is like an exercise. I'm like, okay, the idea's on paper. That means, I've done something about it, and then I can move on. But usually I wake up in the middle of the night and then I message people and they're like, why are you up at 3:30? And I'm like, oh, well, I had this crazy idea.
You deserve to be awake to listen to it. That's right.
Exactly. Are you up? And they're like, go to sleep. What's wrong with you? Well, I have my go-tos. I have my U.S. friends and my friends in Asia. So I know, depending on what time of day it is, who'll be awake. So I'm like, oh, you haven't gone to bed yet? Hey, I've got this wacky idea. And they're thinking, what time is it in England? You should be sleeping.
And you occasionally get it the wrong way around, don't you? It's just like, oh, my friend in the States. It's like, oh, dear.
Oh, yeah.
It was meant to be my friend in Asia.
I've learned to keep it to text. Calling people and getting confused. I'm like, oh, you were sleeping. I'm sorry. It's not an emergency. Don't worry. I keep it to text messages.
I'd like to take this opportunity, obviously, to open up to the floor. We had some questions that people sent in before, but if anyone wants to ask a question, please put a virtual hand up or even just unmute and fire away. Just whilst people might be thinking of jotting something down in the chat, I'm also interested, what if there was one lesson, and I'm sorry to reduce it to one, but if there's one lesson you could go back and tell yourself before maybe you came over to the UK, even if that was the start of your journey, what might that be?
Be fearless. I wish I knew that early on. I was so worried about disappointing people. I was so concerned that I didn't know enough, wasn't good enough, couldn't do it early on. I had to build up a lot of self-confidence, which is ironic because people would say, oh, but you did a lot and you won awards and all this. Just because you see on the surface that somebody has maybe had accolades or been awarded, a scholarship or whatever it may be, doesn't mean that deep down inside they have as much self-confidence as you think they do. So in the early days, I really had to build up my self-confidence to then just say, you know what, I'm going to go for it.
Thanks. Oh, Jason, we've got a... sorry if I've got this wrong way around, but I've got Mainda.
Hi there. I'll put myself on camera. Can you see me? Hi, Jason.
Hi, Mainda.
First of all, I didn't know you had a bar. We have to have a conversation about it. Amazing. I just bring it back to what you were saying about board membership. I had a question about board membership. First of all, from your perspective, when you were CEO previously, what has been the most impactful thing for you from your board members, and what has been least helpful? And then the first question. And then secondly, sorry to throw in two questions. I just wanted to know about opportunities for people to be on boards, because it is part of the ecosystem. You do hear about people being on boards, but I'm not really sure what opportunities there are to get on one, to be selected for one. Is this like a closed, it's about who you know? It's not clear to me how, from a diversity point of view, how people get to be on boards and kind of get the experience, because it could be a chicken and egg situation. So
thanks, Brenda. So I'll take those in turn. The first one was, I'll keep it quick, helpful and less helpful. I would say what's helpful is if you have a good board and they are supporting you like they should do, then they want you to be honest with them. I used to get so much anxiety in the early days. When you're going to a board, you think, oh, these are people, they're investors, they're very experienced. Oh my gosh, I'm on the firing squad. But actually, a good board, like the ones I've been, fortunate to experience, they're not there to attack you. They're there to help you. And when they ask you how things are going, they want to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly. So be open and honest and be able to build that level of trust, so that if there is an issue, they can help you sort it rather than you trying to hide it and think that, oh, if I tell them, they'll think that I'm rubbish at my job. That's something I learned very early on, is about that openness. And then I would say that the thing that boards could do better is learn how to interact with one another. There needs to be, I think, some kind of, how you have individual life coaches? There should be a board coach as well to really get harmony on the board. Because most people just assume, oh, all the problems are on the operational team. Let's make sure they do icebreakers. Let's make sure that they have away days and they spend time together. The board should do the same. Instead of showing up once a quarter and then having their own kind of individual peccadillos and motives, and sometimes you get into a lot of conflict between board members, and it's not constructive. So you've got to balance out those two. And for your second question, it's a lot of different ways. A lot of it is who you know. I'm just going to be quite frank. You need to network. I think letting people know that you're actively seeking board positions, both recruitment agents as well as individuals in the community, they'll think of you when somebody says, oh, I'm looking for a board member. They'll go, oh, you're looking for a profile with X, Y, and Z characteristics. I know somebody, and they'll put you in touch. Recruitment agents we go to for chair and board members as well. So they're looking to know who has experience in the ecosystem, who wants to be a NED or a chair. And if you really want to get started, I would say become an advisor. You don't have to be a director or non-exec director. You can be an advisor, like in an SAB or a general advisory group. So I'm on a couple of advisory boards. I do it for free. I have no contractual relationship, but that will help you understand the governance and put that on your CV, so people will look at you as a board member. So it's a nice low-hanging fruit.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Sure.
And we've got another question from Dan.
Nice to see you. So my question was about building, because I came in, I'm sorry, a bit late. You were just talking about the importance of the team and having that team, which was a sort of a magic combination in a way. You brought together the right people to build the business. So what do you look for in team members? I think in tech, there's a sort of, especially with not having many events, we're not really getting out there and mixing with people who have the real skills to build things in the industry. But at the same time, you want to sort of have these people as, a brilliant combination. How do you hire like a full stack developer who's also got your back?
Ooh, Dan, heavy question. I would say, I would look at it in three kind of fold, right? So there's an aspect of understanding what it is you're trying to accomplish and being very clear on your goals, because oftentimes, even if you get the right people, if it's the wrong fit, then it doesn't work. And I usually find it's not that a person is fundamentally useless. It's usually that they're in the wrong environment, the wrong situation for what you need and for their skill set and what matches their personality, etc. So usually it's a fit issue, as opposed to, I don't think I've ever encountered anybody that I would say, you can't do anything. That just doesn't happen in my experience. The other aspect is understanding what gaps you have in your team already and what kind of culture you want to build. So if you know that you are really lacking in front-end developers, or you're lacking in the UX UI space, or you're lacking in just like business development or project management, whatever it may be, understand that gap and then bring in people to fill those gaps. But you've got to be self-aware, because I think there's a bias we have where we tend to hire people and bring on teams who reflect us. Like, oh, you're just like me. It's a subconscious human bias that too many of us have. And you end up with a homogenous team of people who are all great, but it's not going to move the needle forward. So I'd say understand your direction of travel, make sure you do a really thorough gap analysis and have that self-awareness, and then bring people in who fit the culture and build the culture you want. And you do those three things, you'll find the right people.
Thanks, Jason. So are there any other hands coming up? We're actually just going a tiny bit over time, but it'd be great to, if anyone's got any questions, we can fire them off now. Oh, yeah, we've got a hand.
That's Christian Banky here. Hi, Jason. We've probably lived parallel lives for many years. We've seen the trend with the, lots of money piling into startups. We all know it's not always good to take VC money for some startups, etc. But what do you think is the next trend? What are we going to see in sort of 3 to 5 years? What's going to happen with this frenzy on startups and people taking big rounds? Just one look into the future, please.
Okay, well, I will say something positive and something slightly negative. I will say that there's going to be, on the negative side, a massive cliff where there are too many startups and it's going to have a contraction in the field, because it is like not everything should be a startup. Not everybody should have a startup. And there's a bit of a fad now that everyone says, oh, you have a company? I've got a company. I've got 5 of those. And so everyone's just out there and it's a very frothy space. So I think there's going to be a massive drop off for the startups that just weren't viable to begin with. And that's unfortunate, but it happens and it's better to do it early. I think on a positive note, there's a lot of investors who have traditionally not been in this startup space who are getting into it. I see late stage investors wanting to go early. I see tech investors wanting to get into health. I see financial investors wanting to get into consumer. So there's this interesting idea that people see there's so much overlap in all the different fields. And so it's not only tech that's overlapping, but also investors are moving into new areas. And I think that's really exciting. So I think there will be a bit of a contraction and a drop-off, but also there'll be more capital available from investors with different points of view, which is always good.
Thanks. We've also got Andre.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Jason.
Hi,
Thank you
Andre.
very much for the chat. This was super insightful. I have a brief question about communication, which you mentioned before, that this is like a key aspect and one of the most important things when it comes to leadership. So I just wanted to ask a bit on clarification, like what do you consider to be good communication traits, or how would you define a good communicator?
So a couple quick things. When I was CEO, we used to have what we called, basically like an open kimono session, right? So we call it a town hall session every couple of weeks. And especially after we've had a board meeting, I would tell the entire company what happened at the board, what was discussed that wasn't strictly confidential, and get their feedback in an open format where I try to encourage people to say what was on their mind. Because one of the complaints that I think people had previously was that they didn't know what was going on. They were just told, do your job and get on with it. And if for them to really feel that they're a part of the journey and a key component, they wanted to be engaged. Because I don't care if you're the cleaner or you're the CEO or anybody in between, your opinion matters to me. So I want to know that people feel empowered to do their jobs, but also feel that they're being communicated with and that their views are at least being acknowledged. You don't have to follow everything they do, but at least if you say, hey, this is why we made this a strategic decision. This is why we're not doing this project anymore. This is why we're getting funding from this source. What do you think? Oh, I understand your concerns. Let me address them. We have a cash out. We're going to run out of money at this date. Don't get nervous and start looking for new jobs. We feel confident that the money will come in, but we want you to know that these are the facts. I think that open communication is everything. And I also think that even on smaller teams, oftentimes people will misread an email. They'll think your tone is off. Like, oh, somebody was quite curt to me or somebody this. Go and talk to the person. Communicate with them. And if you find it hard to communicate with another, find someone who's a good communicator to facilitate that conversation. So it's not just being open and listening and being transparent. It's also developing the tools you need to know how to allow others to speak in the room, to not always jump to conclusions and give your colleagues the benefit of the doubt, to find facilitators for conversations if you need them. I think something that's a real pet peeve of mine, I'll leave you on this thought, is I cannot stand when you're in a room and somebody sucks all the air out of the room. I like to create space. Just because somebody's quiet doesn't mean that they don't have something that's as important, even more insightful to say than the people who like to always talk. So be self-aware as well. That's a good communicator. Listen and hear what the person's telling you and give them the room to speak.
Thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you. Thanks, Jason. And thanks for the questions. We are coming up to, we're just gone over our hour that we normally plan for this. If there are any final questions or hands going up, let me know. Yeah.
Thanks.
Go on, Max.
Thank you, Jason, for a great talk as always. Can you give us some comments on VC-funded growth versus organic growth for tech and biotech companies? Is there a good way for a company to determine which growth paths they should choose and when?
Max, I think it's very personal. Like in everything, I believe there's no right or wrong. It's really personal. You just need to know what you're trying to achieve, what time scale and the likelihood that you'll get there, and why you're taking on venture capital. So in some fields, in some areas, it's much harder to go it alone and grow organically. Like if you're going in for a deep tech, biotech play, and you're trying to bring a therapeutic to market, if it's not a digital therapeutic, chances are you're going to need somebody with deep pockets to support you, and grants aren't going to cut it because you won't have a product to sell to be able to support yourself. If you're in another industry where you can actually have the option to grow organically, you might say, well, I'm going to reach a certain inflection point where I want to accelerate my growth, and therefore I'm going to bring in venture capital at that point at a favorable valuation because I've been growing organically. I don't need the money. I want the money. It puts you in a much powerful, much stronger position to negotiate, particularly when it comes to things like pre-money valuation, etc. So there's no right or wrong answer. I think it's very sector and individual dependent. I would say, though, that capital is available. It's flowing. People may not think that, especially if you're listening, you're like, well, I'm struggling to raise capital. What are you saying? There's a lot of dumb capital out there, increasingly so. There are a lot of sovereign wealth funds and investors with loads of money, but you have to choose the right person for the right reason. So it's not just, can I get money to do X? What else are they bringing to the table? What doors will they open? Will they help you hone your strategy? This is a different way of thinking.
Thank you very much.
Well, Jason, I think that's maybe one more question from me. I just want to go back to the Marshall Scholarship that you won. It's quoted as being for intellectually distinguished young Americans and their country's future leaders. Do you have any political aspirations, Jason?
No. I would leave it at that. No.
I think we will. Can I just take this opportunity to thank Jason from all of us from the audience and from us at ideaSpace. It's been so insightful. So many great nuggets of experience. Some quotes there. I know we're getting loads of thank yous up in the chat as well. It really is terrific, and I know we could go on far longer. We really appreciate your time. I just want to say a quick thank you to Sophie, Kirsten, and Terry on the ideaSpace team who have organised this. Obviously, I should also say, is there somewhere that people can follow you? I know some people are into the social media or not. Is there somewhere that people can follow you on social media?
Just connect with me on LinkedIn. To be honest, I have a Twitter account. I never use it because I'm a Luddite. So follow me on LinkedIn. And if you need any help or support or an intro to anybody, I'll try to help you in any way that I can. I always tell people, if you don't hear from me, chase me. Don't be shy. It's not because I don't want to help you. Maybe I missed your message, but please do reach out.
Thank you. Thanks again so much. And if anyone wants to hear anything more about ideaSpace, again, just go online, check us out, and ask any questions if you want to about us. So finally, thanks once again. We really, really do appreciate it, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
For more information or any inquiries about joining ideaSpace, please contact us via ideaspace.cam.ac.uk or via any of our social media channels.